Hello, doctor. Today, what I'd like to talk about is the benefits of great injury documentation. What are the benefits of great injury documentation? I remember back in 1995 when I decided my own private practice after I was about 3 years into serious practice building and I was seeing a lot of patients a week, very much to the top of my tolerance level of how many patients I could see in a week. And I decided that I was working 70, 80-hour weeks that I wanted to, I could start to decide what kind of patients I wanted to treat. And one of the patients that I really loved treating was injury patients. And the reason why I loved treating injury patients was because they have such a high risk for never fully recovering. And I knew that I was good enough that I could seriously reduce down that risk. And I really liked taking advantage of that. I really liked that challenge. I also liked the fact that there was no patient finances involved. I didn't have to talk about patients selling them a program or selling them, additional visits that their insurance wasn't going to pay for. I didn't have to do any of that. I did in the other aspect of my practice, but I didn't in the injury practice. In my injury practice, I really liked that. So when I got into it, one of the things I realized is that your documentation is super important. Now, your documentation is super important for you to have a a much more stress-free practice. So, when you walk in, a patient walks in and they've either got a referral from an attorney or they walk in themselves and they've been in an auto accident, they bring a medical legal condition in with them. And that medical legal condition requires documentation. It's pretty much the same, but in some ways it's a little bit different. Some of the terminology is a little bit different in the injury space than it is in the chronic pain space. But it requires a level of documentation that allows the patient access to any benefits they're entitled to. Your documentation, and I understood this very quickly in private practice, my documentation allowed the patient access to any benefits they were entitled to. It didn't dictate what the benefits were. It just allows them access because every patient is different. Every patient is hit by somebody's different. I mean, you could have, just look at it in an auto accident. You could have, let's say the neighbor borrows my car and is driving my car and is hit in an auto accident, okay? And the person that hit them borrowed their father's car. They were 26 years old, borrowed their father's car to drive it, and they hit the patient, right? Now, the person that hit my patient has their own auto insurance, whatever that coverage is. The coverage of the car, whoever owns the car has coverage. They have both coverage for liability and coverage for underinsured motorists. And they may even have a catastrophic rider. So let's say that the kid borrowed the dad's car and the dad's got $1 million catastrophic rider policy. And he's got $300,000 worth of liability insurance. There's $1.3 million worth of insurance right there. Right? So every case is different. It's not your job to determine the benefits. It's your job to actually reduce the benefits and benefit need. When you get a patient well, you inherently reduce the benefit need. So that's really your job. But what does good documentation do for you? It makes the whole process of being in the personal injury space a lot easier. And if you're going to grow your practice, let's say you're doing 10, 20, 30, 50, 100 personal injury patients a month, then your documentation is everything, because that's the thing that really clogs down practices. Now, benefit to the patient is obvious. And basically, they get their access to any benefits they're entitled to. Benefit to you is you get paid better. So when I say paid better, it's probably not even a good way to say paid better. You just get paid. You get paid for the services that you delivered. So whenever I hear doctors in the market going, oh my gosh, I'm taking 50% reductions and I hate this market because of these reductions, I know there's a documentation issue, 100%. If you're sitting there right now, and here's how I know it. I'll give you a simple litmus test. I get doctors calling me and say, oh my gosh, I'm having problems. The attorneys don't understand. They don't understand the patient's injuries. I say, all right, great, let's pull one file. Pull Bill Smith. Good. What spinal injuries does Bill Smith have? Well, Dr. Kronk, he was in a 45-mile-an-hour accident. That's not an injury. Well, Dr. Kronk, he had bad whiplash. That's not an injury. He had bad injury to his neck. He had bad neck injuries. That's not an injury. That's like saying, hey, he had bad lower extremity injuries. That's great. Nothing specific about that. If you, in your documentation, cannot pull a file easily within 2 minutes and go, these are this patient's injuries, this is what I'm working on, the exact injuries, exact location, and how bad they are, then you have a documentation issue, doctor. It's just that simple. Now, if you fix that documentation problem, guess what you have? Better pay, better professionalism perceived in the market, better opportunity for referrals, better attorney relationships, better insurer relationships, and a booming, expanding practice. Documentation is the key to the injury space headaches, to reduction of those headaches. Like I said, when I walked into the injury space, I realized, oh, I'm in a medical legal situation. It's my documentation that allows me to do well on depositions, because in order for me to document well, I have to understand what the condition is. And if I understand what the condition is, documentation is easy. There's a personal injury documentation is some of the easiest documentation, I think, of all the documentation. I mean, it pales in comparison to like Medicare documentation. It pales in comparison. So documentation is the key, but you have to know the injuries. Now, as the CEO of an excessive motion testing, medical excessive motion testing company called Spinal Kinetics, I developed this company. And I stayed in and hung around to standardize spinal injury workups, because there's only 3 injuries you can work up: a fracture, excessive motion, or disc herniation, or combinations thereof. And if you have a disc herniation, it's an unconfirmed pre-existing condition. And the reason why I say that is you haven't confirmed that it was caused by the accident, because there's no way that a shear force in an auto accident is just going to hit the disc, but it's not going to hit the surrounding tissue. So if you don't understand what I'm talking about, look at a model. There's 10 ligaments that hold a spinal motion unit together. 9 of those ligaments are designed to hold the motion unit together and the disc in alignment. Right? So it's impossible for that force to just hit the disc. It'd be like if I took your finger right now and I smashed it with a ball-peen hammer, and you said, "Oh my God, Dr. Kronk, you broke my finger. You fractured my finger." You went to a medical doctor. They sent you to the radiologist. They got X-rays. They said, "Look, you got an upper. You have a stress fracture of your finger." You say, "Hey, I'm suing you. I want money." I can easily say the ball-peen hammer didn't cause that. Why? Because nobody documented the tissue damage that would be consistent with what that mechanism we leave behind in order to get to the bone. The energy in an automobile accident does not just go to the disc, it goes through other tissue, if it indeed was caused by the accident. If it's not caused by the accident, generally it's considered to be a pre-existing condition. So your documentation is the key, doctors. Once I understood documentation, life was simple in the personal injury space. Simple for depots, simple for trials, simple. And I think that's where you want to be. Documentation is the key.